All right, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Citizen Remote's Q&A sessions. I am joined today by our partner in Serbia, Damjan Despotovic. Damjan, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to figure out all about Serbia. When I think of Serbia in my head, I think of kind of cold and snow, but you're saying that there's been a big heat wave going on over there. So maybe you can kind of just introduce us to what to expect and kind of the lifestyle of Serbia just right off the top, and then we'll kind of dive into some visa stuff.
Maybe you had Siberia in mind.
Maybe.
Hello, Tim, first of all, and thanks for having me. Serbia is a European country, so the lifestyle is pretty much European. And most of your listeners probably heard about Belgrade. Maybe some of them didn't, but it's people say it's an exciting city and there's a lot of fun. And I would say it has like typical European features, a little bit of Middle Eastern features. So it's an interesting mix.
Yeah, and it's just right up by Greece and over there. Probably good to clarify. It's not Siberia for everyone who's listening. But I haven't actually been to Serbia specifically. I've been all around the region, and it's kind of unique to see. I'm assuming it's similar in Serbia, like kind of the old Greek or Roman structures that still kind of exist every now and again, and stuff like that over in that kind of Balkan
Yes,
area.
I mean, the architecture is a mix of different influences. There are some antique structures, but also from the Ottoman times, Austrian times, a lot of modern architecture as well, socialist architecture, and now Belgrade is actually developing really fast at the moment, and as of recently, for the better and for the worse. Some of the features are positive, some of them not so much, but also depends a lot on whom you ask. But there is a lot of construction going on. A lot of things are changing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is changing is that it's becoming definitely more international. So it's become an interesting hub for digital nomads, IT experts. So there is a quite big and vibrant expat community.
Wonderful. And so that's obviously, what we want to kind of dive into. It seems like it's quite entrepreneurial, tech forward. And for any of those kind of remote workers wanting to consider this region in the world, Serbia specifically, I know that there's no digital nomad visa, as we were kind of just discussing before this specifically, but there is, that's kind of a general term anyways. There is a visa category in which we've assisted clients before through Citizen Remote and you guys. So maybe you can kind of elaborate on what that visa category is, and we can go from there.
Yeah, there are different grounds based on which temporary residency or the joint permit, as it is called now, can be obtained. Joint permit basically means one permit that allows you to legally stay and work in Serbia, and it is obtained in a unified procedure. And there are obviously different grounds such as employment, self-employment, family reasons, education, investment in a Serbian company, purchase of real estate, also establishment of an innovative startup in Serbia, which is relatively new. And to answer your question, the most popular path for digital nomads is the joint permit based on self-employment. It includes establishment of an entrepreneur agency or a limited liability company in Serbia, and you're eligible to apply for the joint permit based on this, based on self-employment, because you have a company in Serbia. And it is quite flexible because you don't need to have an employer in Serbia. You do not need to have anyone inviting you to work in Serbia for them. You can set everything up by yourself. and it has also some tax benefits. In a nutshell, establishing of a entrepreneur agency is relatively simple and not very expensive. And as an entrepreneur, you qualify for lump sum taxation. You don't need to have a bookkeeper for your agency. You just pay lump sum taxes, which are around 350 euros per month.
Okay.
And this includes health insurance and all other mandatory social contributions. And there is no other taxation for your business income, which comes through your agency. So digital nomads can redirect their income through the agency, and all of it will be covered by the lump sum taxation up to the limit of 50,000 euros per year.
Okay. Wow. So that seems like a quite enticing tax regime there. I know that you kind of said that setting up an entity, sometimes people will hear that and they'll think there are many costs associated with that. You said it's not very costly. When it comes to setting up an entity to be eligible for this visa category, does it have to be like a physical entity? Is it an online process? Like, maybe you can just walk us through what that process looks like for people to kind of understand?
Theoretically, you can do it remotely or online. We can do it based on power of attorney. So the client does not have to come to Serbia personally. But most of the cases, clients will come one time to our office to sign the power of attorney. And based on this, we are able to register the entrepreneur agency in their name. They need an office, but this can also be a virtual office. And also, it is important to note that as opposed to some other countries which have an explicit digital nomad visa, there are not monthly income requirements in Serbia. So you don't need to have a specific income in order to qualify. You just need to show that you have more than 400 euros on your Serbian bank account at the time of applying for temporary residency, which is an equivalent to the minimum salary in Serbia.
Okay, wow. So only 400 euros to show that you have savings. That's not a big hurdle for a lot of people. So that's kind of a unique thing as well. And then I'm assuming that means that you're going to have to go through the process of setting up a bank account prior to applying. So that's going to be, complex.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So the sequence of steps is more or less we establish a company on behalf of the client, then we open a bank account when I say company, I mean either a limited liability company or an entrepreneur agency. After that, we establish a business bank account and a personal bank account for the purpose that I mentioned. You need to deposit at least 400 euros. And then, together with some other documents and formalities, when everything is collected, then we can apply for either temporary residency or the joint permit, depending on the case. And this is all done electronically now, the application process. Although after the permit is approved, the client needs to come to the Department for Foreigners personally in order for them to take their biometrics and to issue the foreigner ID.
Yep, absolutely. So that last step is obviously in person, which is, that's everywhere in the
correct.
world. You gotta go there and say hello. So maybe you can elaborate on how long that temporary residence permit for this, specific entrepreneurial type visa that we're talking about here, how long is that awarded initially, and then how long can you extend it for?
It is issued for up to 3 years. This is the maximum, and typically people request the maximum duration. The only limitation is validity of your passport. I mean, obviously, if you request the permit based on employment, then there might be other limitations, duration of your employment in Serbia. But for self-employment, there are no limitations other than validity of foreigner's passport.
Okay, and then you said that it's awarded for a maximum of 3 years. I'm assuming that's the initial temporary residence permit. Um,
and the joint permit as well.
and the joint permit. So can that be extended, or would you have to then kind of switch to another visa category, or how does that look after that
It
3 year
can
period?
it can be extended, but now also after the most recent changes to the legislation, you are also eligible to apply for permanent residency after staying in Serbia for 3 years based on temporary residence.
Oh wow.
So this is the logical extension. That would be the logical extension of the process. After the initial 3 years, you apply for permanent residency.
Okay,
The
wonderful.
requirement is that you must not leave Serbia in this 3 year period for more than 6 months in one instance or for more than 9 months in total.
So that means that you're saying to be there for 3 years and apply for permanent residency, you can't leave over that 3 year period for more than 9 months.
That's correct.
Yeah. To pretty much say, yes, I'm an actual resident who lives here full time.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. And then is this open for all nationalities? Are there kind of restrictions? Is it geared towards one over another?
There are no limitations, but there are differences. A different path will apply to nationals of countries which have a non-visa regime with Serbia, which is generally much easier, I would say. So they are allowed, and typically this is how it goes in practice. They are allowed to come to Serbia without any type of visa. And then, depending on the international treaty, or I should say bilateral treaty, they're allowed to stay in Serbia between 30 and 90 days. And within this period, they are required to submit the request for temporary residency or joint permit. So it is quite comfortable. And in most cases, this deadline is 90 days. So the foreigner will come to Serbia and will have a period of 90 days to collect all the documents, establish an entrepreneur agency if this is the preferred option, and apply for residency or the joint permit. It is important to submit the request within this deadline, and the foreigner is allowed to legally stay in Serbia until the request is processed, until it is resolved, basically, which can take between 1 month and 2 months. But still, it does not really typically does not affect the foreigner because they're allowed to stay in Serbia until it is processed, even though the initial 90 days may have expired already.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, as long as you're in the country and you've kind of started and submitted that application, then you're able to
Yes.
stay until you've gotten a
I mean,
result.
to be sure, they're not allowed to work in Serbia in this period, but with digital nomads, this is quite fluid and difficult to prove whether someone is working or not working.
Yeah, you can't have that laptop and then it comes down
Yeah.
to are you working on the laptop? Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of speaking of that timeline that we were just talking about, is there a timeline in which you would recommend somebody who is applying from abroad to start considering this? Obviously, you said it only takes around 1 to 2 months to get a result, but if I wanted to go there in December and it's September, is that enough time?
If you come from a country which has a non-visa regime with Serbia, then I would say yes, because you can literally come to Serbia and then start thinking about collecting the documents and fulfilling the requirements. It is a bit different. For example, it would be different if you want to start working in a company in Serbia for a Serbian employer. Then it would need to be planned a little bit in advance because you cannot start working legally before you get the work permit or visa D. Visa D is a visa for a longer stay in Serbia. And sometimes this is used for foreigners which are referred to work in a Serbian company by their employer, for example, because the processing time is less as compared to temporary residency and work permit. But it is only issued for 6 months, and then you need to apply for the joint permit.
Okay. And then, so wrapping up here, we only got about 2 more questions. Are dependents allowed to come with this visa? Can you have like a wife and kids? Or
yes. This is a legitimate reason for applying for temporary residency. If your immediate family member is a resident in Serbia or only submitted the request for temporary residency, family members are allowed to apply for temporary residency on these grounds. This is called family reunification.
Okay, wonderful. And then, last question here, stay requirements. I know that you said one of the things that you needed was a virtual office. Maybe you can kind of elaborate on what that looks like, but then also, do they need to obtain some type of accommodation, like for a minimum amount of time, or just show proof that they have a reservation or anything of the sort?
There are 2 different things. Because since you're applying for temporary residency as an individual, you need a proof of a place to stay. So you need an apartment, and if the apartment is not owned by the foreigner, which is typically not the case, then you need a written consent by the apartment owner or a lease agreement. So this is one thing. And the other thing is that you need an office for your company, which can be a virtual office, it can be a real office, or which has become popular now, some kind of office sharing or anything along these lines.
Okay, wonderful. Well, this has been so informative. Obviously, it sounds like there's some good tax incentives. It sounds like there's a long-term pathway to, permanent residency and so on and so forth, and not a huge hurdle in terms of income per month. So, obviously, it's not freezing cold in Serbia, everyone. It does get really hot. So, Damjan, I really appreciate this. Is there anything that we didn't really cover that you wanted to specifically mention, or?
Yeah. I would just like to add, for the sake of completeness, that to get, let's say, a more complete picture, I mentioned that a much easier path applies to citizens of the countries which have a non-visa regime with Serbia. And some of the countries which are in this regime is the European Union countries, United States, United Kingdom, also China, Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, Israel, Australia. And these are some of the examples. And for them, it is much easier. And for the other countries which visa is required, the procedure is somewhat different. They first need to obtain a visa D from Serbian embassy in their country of residence, and similar conditions, I should say same conditions, are required for visa D as for temporary residency, with one exception: they need an invitation letter. So this makes it a bit more demanding, because they need a company or individual in Serbia to vouch for them, basically.
Okay.
I mean, there are ways to overcome this depending on the situation. Of course, if they have an employer in Serbia, then it's easy. If not, then it's a bit more complicated.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and then obviously, if this video prompted any questions for any listeners, they can obviously head to Citizen Remote, schedule a direct consultation with you, and figure out their specific details, because this is definitely more generalized for anyone listening. You can just do that anytime. So, Damjan, I appreciate the time, and thank you so much for joining us and educating us on Serbia visas.
Thank you, Tim. It was a pleasure. and I hope it will be useful for some people who are considering relocating to Serbia. And as you said, for any specifics, we are available for consultations.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.